Two, one. Hey, everybody, welcome back. I'm Susan Linder, your host of the Innovation Storytellers Show, where we seek to break the myth that it's just the big idea and the great breakthrough that actually takes us to the finish line when we know we need great communication and great story wrapped around our innovation in order to make progress. And I'm really excited to have with me here today Dr. Marie-Hélène Pelletier, but you are going to hear me call her MH throughout the course of this conversation, where we are going to talk about resilience. And for all of my innovating friends out there, I know how hard it can be to feel resilient in the face of political headwinds, in the face of changing strategies, changing economics, changing governmental structures that we're facing post-election. So everything is in a constant state of flux. And that's why I thought it'd be great to have an expert on who can talk to us about resilience. So let me tell you a little bit about MH. Throughout her career in management and psychology, Dr. Pelletier has been spearheading the dialogue on the crucial issues of leadership resilience and work performance. Drawing on her extensive background in corporate, insurance, and governance, she brings an international perspective and unique expertise on leadership. With more than 20 years of experience as a leadership psychologist, executive coach, and senior leader, MH is a member of the Global Clinical Practice Network of the World Health Organization and the past director of the boards on the Canadian Psychological Association and the International Association of Applied Psychology. She has presented and authored and co-authored a number of industry and academic publications and has won numerous academic and industry awards. Dr. Pelletier is a highly rated instructor at the University of British Columbia, the Sauder School of Business, Executive Education, and a member of the Harvard Business Review Advisory Council, an opt-in research community of business professionals. Her award-winning book, The Resilience Plan, A Strategic Approach to Optimizing Your Work Performance and Mental Health, was named a top 5 book to read by Inc. magazine and Forbes. And if you need any more encouragement in that to go and get a book, ask for it for Christmas, then I don't know what else you need, because if nothing else, in the wake of all this volatility and change, we need resilience as a core capability in our executive portfolio. So, Doctor, thank you so much for joining me today on the show.
Oh, Susan, it's a pleasure to be here, and do call me MH.
I will. I absolutely will. And you and I share this connection with Harvard. I know you're on the business review side. I work with students who are at the Harvard Innovation Lab, helping to judge their competition every year in the President's Challenge. And I see these kids on stage, kids, I'm calling them, they're undergrads with big ideas, things that they come to the table fearless about, addressing maternal child health, ending malaria, you name it. They've figured out a way to solve these big problems. And frankly, resilience hasn't even necessarily entered into the equation as a young innovator. But yet, as we move through the corporate world, the skin that we need to thicken in order to get our big ideas approved is immense. And it can feel pretty daunting sometimes, even those of us accustomed to failure. Tell us a little bit, maybe just starting from the beginning, MH, how should we think of resilience today in a world that is constantly changing, and especially when we are the change makers?
Yes, right. So many good comments. One of the key places I wanted my book to be at was in university libraries and university bookstores, because
Mm,
so many of my clients over the years have said, I wish I knew this when I started my career. And we know from research that early career professionals and leaders and innovators are in fact at more risk of burnout, because in part, you come in with all these ideas, you don't know yet the degree to which all these other aspects will be demanding, and that creates a challenge. So how we want to think about resilience. First, definition, always a good place to start. There are many definitions in the academic literature. The one I'm using and many are using is our ability to go through adversity and come out even stronger. So adversity meaning We often think of adversity as an acute moment. It can be that, but it can be a chronic moment, a demand that happens over time and sometimes to all of us on the planet, but still the demand. And there is this element of we're coming out of it even stronger. So there is a growth element. We're learning from this and then we're carrying on. So even in your introduction, as you were talking about the various things, demands that we could be facing, all of them are actually demands that we want to make sure we see with clarity. And often, as part of being an entrepreneur, it comes with the territory. We almost have an optimistic bias.
Mm.
Minimize the demands. We overestimate the supply we have here. Oh, I can do everything, anything, all of it. And people tell us, oh, you're the rock. You can make anything happen. And then that means we actually develop blind spots. We stop seeing the fuller picture. And that's in part what puts us at risk from a resilience perspective.
Mm. Because I suppose if we were just surviving, it would just be called the endurance plan, right? But resilience, this implies going beyond enduring and coming out stronger. So even if and I love what you said about having like this chronic condition, right? So I know that my boss is a curmudgeon, and his first response to any new big idea that I bring to him is always going to be no. Right. So I am resilient in the face of that because I come up with a great story in order to win my boss over. Right. I've developed new communication skills. I've developed new way of thinking, or I've amassed a group of early adopters, right? Or advocates who will come with me to the table. That's a sign of resilience as opposed to just enduring my painful boss, as one
So
example.
true.
Is that
Very
accurate?
true. It's very important because, yes, sometimes people will equate automatically resilience with endurance or persistence at all cost.
Mm,
And no, sometimes we're not staying here. It is not about persisting or enduring at all costs. No, it isn't. Yes, it is about having a plan. And in effect, that's even in the example you're giving now. That's in effect what you did. You realized, all right, in my current context, one of the demands is a boss that says no every single time, which, if I don't do anything about this, could get to me, would be a normal human reaction. So you're
mm,
saying, well, part of my plan is getting even better at communicating about this, getting outside of the usual, here are the 3 points, and telling a story instead. And these kinds of things, then number one, make it more interesting for you. That's more fun. And number two, it sounds like it works. So that's an idea. That's an example of a plan right there.
right. And resilience it also sounds like the desire to keep trying, but looking for an actual solution. It's not getting stuck, right? It's trying and overcoming.
Oh, yes.
Mhm.
Yes. And it is something that's very dynamic because the other piece with resilience is that and sometimes we think of it as a personality trait. Oh, I'm resilient. Oh, this person's not so resilient. It is not a personality trait. It's a
It's not a
state. It is
personality trait.
not. No, it has been, it is connected with some personality traits like optimism, for example. So individuals who tend to be higher on that trait will tend in general to have higher levels of resilience over time. But for all of us, including the most optimistic people, it varies over time. Moments where we have more of it, moments where we have less of it. And the
Mm,
good news with this is, of course, therefore we can influence it. And
mm.
my point is we should, and we need a plan to do that.
Yeah. So, thinking about this, how does one create, I mean, your book is called The Resilience Plan. What are the beginnings? How should we begin thinking about actually creating a plan to be resilient? Do we go into our job each day thinking about this? Like, where do we begin?
Yes. So the the idea of the resilience plan came because I was working with high level professionals and leaders who, like most of us, had well, me, of course, I'm in the field, but most people had heard the kinds of things we would want to do to increase, say, our resilience. We heard a lot about them in the pandemic, and we generally talk more about these things. And many of them are research based. Things like 3 types of exercise: cardio, strength training, and meditative type activity like meditation, yoga, tai chi, all of these. We want good nutrition, we want sleep, and we want time in relationships we enjoy spending time with.
And we
There
want
are
a 48-hour day. Is that right?
no, well,
Get all
and
that
I'm
done.
coming to this. I mean, but truly, if resilience was a mathematical equation, these 4 variables would account for most of it. Really, this is it. Now, there are more. There are other variables like spending time in nature, volunteer work, and there are other things like this. So, okay, so we have a sense and we're thinking, well, that sounds good. I have 0 time for this. I don't even have time to do the things I'm measured on and paid to do, right? Or have to do in my personal life. So, but then we do need that resilience because especially if you're a high level professional and leader, the demands will be such that if you don't do this, at some point you're at risk of burning out.
Mhm.
So in the book, I said, okay, we're going to bring what we know from psychology, solid, clear, and we're going to bring elements we use in business strategy because we need to take your context into account. The story I would sometimes say to my clients is, well, if we were here in a business situation and we had a fabulous, great idea ready to launch, would we just say, great, let's launch now? Or would we say, okay, who else is offering anything close to this? How much are they charging for it? Who is paying for this? What kinds of forces might impact it in the near or far future? We would do all this, right? We would look at the context and then build a strategy to launch with success. So
Mm.
same idea here. We want more resilience, great. And we need to take our overall context into account to design a plan that makes it work. So, like, do you want an example of what that looks like?
Yes, please.
Always helpful. And I have worksheets to get there, and we can get into details of how we get there. But the output at the end looks like a strategy would have in a business plan. 3 pillars, tactics, meaning actions under each pillar. And now you implement and you review it in whatever duration of time you need and go. So let's say in the overall process to get there high level, we need to review your values. We need to have clarity on your sources of supply and demands. I can say more about this. And we're looking at your context, much like we would in business, do a SWOT analysis, looking at your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Once you've done all this, you get your plan. So let's say you, Susan, I'll just make some assumptions, everyone. I have not asked her any of these questions before. So
Going in cold.
no getting into privacy issues here. But let's say Susan has done her reflection on her own values, and let's say one of them is health. And let's say she's looked at the immense demands that she's facing of all types. And yes, she wishes that she could exercise and meditate, but she's right now not doing any of this. Last time was 3 months ago. And her overall context just doesn't allow for anything. Okay. Well, then we may have a pillar that is going to be meditation. And maybe there's going to be an action under this pillar that's going to be each time I wash my hands, I take 5 deep breaths. So we're already washing our hands. We're all washing more hands now. So that's good. It's not creating more demands or anything like this, but it's giving you that moment. Okay, fine. That's simple. See, that level of plan is not what's going to change Susan's life in terms of making her a meditative expert. But what we're now doing is, well, this is much more than anything she was doing yesterday. And once we start implementing these actions, it builds our sense of self-efficacy, the belief that I can do this. And the more we build this, we build the belief that we could do things like this again in the future. That's a bit more optimism.
Yeah, we're
And the
creating an
more,
evidence pattern almost for
right?
ourselves, right? In
Yes,
our innovation parlance here, we build a pattern of evidence such that we can take the data back and say, we can do more.
that's right. And want it or not, brain picks it up. Like, yes, logically we see it, but even if you decided, I don't believe in this, but I'm still going to do it, the brain would pick it up. And so that's where you build from, right? But you see how, no, we're not creating a plan where we're sending Susan for an hour and a half meditation on a daily basis. Not going to happen.
Yeah.
But we are sending her on an action that is doable given her context. And now we're on some useful track. And that's what people say down the road. They'll say, that's the difference between feeling like my life's out of control and I'm actually driving this.
So, there's been a lot mentioned about habit stacking. Is that kind of akin to how we build some of this plan into our resilience? Resilience into our plan, rather?
For some of them, it may be. Yes. I mean, habit stacking is something that works. Absolutely. You want to implement any new habit. If you're connecting it with an existing one, your chances of being successful are higher. So yes. And there are other things you can do to increase your chances, like choice architecture, creating the environment such that you're just more likely to do it. Grocery stores do it all the time, but we can do it too. If we're planning to do, say, 4 minutes of yoga, which is what most apps will do at the shortest, 4 minutes.
4 minutes. That takes me that long just to get into downward dog.
I know. That's what I thought too. Try it. I can give you suggestions, Susan.
Okay.
But seriously, it's actually remarkably impactful, much more than what you would think. Sorry, oh yeah. So what I was going to say is, of course, I have my yoga mat and I could say, well, I'll put it out when I need to do it. If what I do is I put the yoga mat down unrolled at the place where I'm going to do it so that I do it first thing in the morning, the fact that it's in my face, in fact, under my feet when I arrive, say, downstairs, increases the chances I will do my 4 minutes. That's choice architecture.
This reminds me of being in college and wearing the clothes I had to wear to class the next day to bed so I could make my 8 a.m. Spanish class on time. I just got into my classroom clothing the night before. I was like, forget the pajamas. That's a luxury at this point. I will never make it to my 8 a.m. Spanish class if I'm not already dressed. That is not going to happen.
Well, that's high level efficiency for sure. But sometimes it won't be about necessarily habit stacking necessarily. Someone in reviewing their values, let's say family is there and they realize that they work all the time. And even when they work from home, if someone from the family enters their office, they keep clicking away while they're half listening. It may be that one of their pillars will be relationships. And it may be that one of their actions will be when anyone enters the room, if the door is open, meaning it's okay, I will actually stand up from my desk and turn around to be fully present to my family member that comes in. Now I've aligned it actually won't take much longer than what I was trying to finish, right?
Because we know we can't really multitask anyway, right? The brain is not really doing that well.
See, but this, again, very small action, doable. No one, would say, well, I don't have time to do this. You can, I mean, in extreme times, maybe not, but most of the time that's a possibility. And it's shifting some of your actions to align them better with your values in a way that's doable. But this one is an example where it's not necessarily about, say, stacking habits, but it is an action that could be part of your plan.
Mm-hmm. So you talk in your book about neither rock nor wreck. Take us through this idea.
Yes. It's most of the time when I work with professionals and leaders, they are sometimes they've said it, sometimes they've been told that they are the rock of the team, rock of the family, rock of the group of friends, rock. You're the rock. We can throw anything at you. You're going to make it happen. And you are always managing. And so you get to a point where you almost think you are. Logically you're not, obviously, but you take it because it's given with a lot of it's meant very positively, of course. But part of the challenge with this is that if you stay in that I'm a rock mentality over here, of course, a rock does not need to invest in their resilience, right? Because you're a rock. And so you stay there until you can't. And then you crash. And that's when people will tell me I'm a wreck. And they didn't see it coming because they stayed in the rock camp this whole time until they couldn't at all. The reality is that this is actually a continuum. The other reality is we are not rocks, we are humans. And therefore, the sooner you stop telling yourself this, or even I would sometimes encourage people to say, if your loved one is calling you that, maybe go back home and say, darling, just find another word. That's not helpful. I'm not a rock. And so that we move into a more realistic perspective of, no, we're all humans. Those demands are having an impact. Like when people are telling us, why are things constantly failing? You're not delivering on any of the things. We don't have budgets anymore. We're not sure about this role. We're not sure about you in this role. We're not sure about the team you've hired. Whatever. These are demands. And
Mm.
we need to see them as such and be clear that no, we're not a rock, so that we can build a plan to keep our health, keep bringing our best to these conversations while maintaining our fabulously innovation minded mindset here for ourselves and the team we lead.
Yeah, so important, right? Because we can't continue to be a rock inherently will crumble, right? And if we
Mm,
don't if we really don't take the time to understand our own levels of resilience, then we run a real risk of burning out.
yeah,
And I hear it all the time from folks who have been on this show. The level of burnout in innovation is real because you're living with a constant state of trial and error and a lot of failure. You're dealing with a lot of political headwinds, right? From people who want to see results. They want to see it done in the next quarter. They want a game-changing product, but can you get it done in within budget of whatever it is we're spending on the current product that's been successful and revenue generating for the last 10, 15 years? Right? The fear of risk, whether that's material or reputational, all of these things. I mean, there's a huge risk of burnout for us
yeah.
today.
Yes, yes, there is. And sometimes part of what may need to be considered in your plan, if you're in this kind of role, maybe to have a pillar where you're, and I'll just invent for right now, but could be something like protecting my mindset. And in that pillar, you may have an action, which is anytime anyone is uh, almost like sharing with me their own response or anxiety to the work I need to be doing, I'll remind myself first that whatever they tell me belongs to them. So
Mm.
I'm not taking it all, that it's all about me as leader of this, potentially not doing the things I'm supposed to do or whatever. They are coming at it from their own mindset, their own area of expertise. And the fastest I can remind myself that they're coming at it from their perspective. They're the CFO. Of course, they're thinking about these kinds of things. They are the business development person. Of course, they're like wanting the thing now or whatever they're asking. So we remind ourselves that they're coming from their perspective, and we need to see that and respond from that place, which is a bit of what you did in your original example of responding with stories instead and approaching it differently than your usual, well, here are the reasons and here are the things, for example.
So, what is the story that we need to be telling ourselves? Because I think it starts with us in terms of managing our own resilience is we don't have to be the rock or the wreck, right? That's the internal dialogue. We have to get really clear. I love in your book, we have to get really clear about our core values and what truly matters to us, because those are really the things we're going to act on. We know on the storytelling side that emotion drives action, not data, right? It's what we feel what will actually cause us to act. And then, you also have in your book is looking at the supply and demand of your life, right? I mean, we think about it so much at work, but what's really happening for me? So, as we think about telling ourselves a new story, where do we start with that story?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good question. And to some degree, it's going to be very personal to each of us and
Mm.
at each moment. What I think at a high level for today's conversation, I would say you want to consider telling yourself the story of it's almost like your own happiness. I'm going big here, I know. But if you start from there, if you're starting from your values, which will include the things that you're passionate about, that brought you to innovation, that brought you to this kind of role, to the particular industry you're in, then you're going to be connecting with but to your point, your own emotions, what's most important for you. And so
Mhm.
as you do this, if you can tell yourself a story that has self-compassion in it. I know I'm going in with the big words here. And sometimes people roll their eyes with the self-compassion thing. It's research-based, it's solid. All it means is that what you would extend to a colleague over here who's going through something demanding or challenging, right? Oh, I understand. Okay, we'll adjust deadlines or we'll build support around you so we can make this happen. Let's put it around you, yourself as well. So, in effect, you are being very realistic about the fact that you are human. You are
Mhm.
looking at your values, what drive you. You are being self-compassionate about the demands you're facing. And as you do this, and sometimes people say, well, I can't do this because I'm gonna feel weak or out of control or whatever. No, it will give you more clarity on your situation. Your situation stays the same. You just have more clarity. It's the same as if you were in business and you said, don't show me the financial statements. I don't want to see these numbers. It could be difficult for me to watch. No one would ever say this. We want to see the numbers, as painful
I
as
might
sometimes.
at the end of the quarter if I'm not hitting my numbers, MH. I'm just letting you know. Sometimes I don't want to know. But yes, eventually we all have to know.
Eventually you will, right? I hear you though. Um, but the idea is we're just increasing clarity. And with that clarity, that means you're more grounded. So all the fabulous things you continue to be. You just have more clarity on the whole thing and therefore can lead with much more control, really.
What's the difference between creating a resilience plan and resetting your priorities?
Well, I like resetting your priorities. It will probably in part be in your resilience plan, but if you're only resetting your priorities, it could remain a bit of a cognitive exercise over here. Oh, look, I've got my list of priorities. Nice.
We need behaviors that go with this, right?
We need the behaviors. It needs to translate into choices. And because we're so busy, if you don't have a plan, you will not do them.
Mm,
Mm.
right.
So yeah, the reflection on priority is actually important. Often it actually connects with my equivalent here is review your values. So we have that clarity on what's most important for you. And sometimes people will have a list of whatever, 15 values. And then I'll say, well, for your first plan, you're going to pick one and the rest are in parentheses. So they're not gone, of course. They're all important for you. But in effect, we are prioritizing, you are, and then you're focusing on this for this iteration of your strategic plan. But yes, you're connecting it with action. Without action, nothing changes.
Right. And that's the getting stronger point, right? It's not just, I mean, because, people get to their retirement party and go, darn, my priority was my family. I just never actually acted on it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. So it keeps that in check too. Yeah.
Can you give us an example of when someone uses the resilience plan, like what shifts for them, like a
Yes.
before and after story? I would love to get a sense of like what really happens with the plan.
Yes. Well, and one of the things that happened was when you write a book, that's my only book probably forever. But so
Right. It
I
is
learned
hard.
I learned everything as I was doing it. But one of the things that people do, as many of your listeners will know, is you can do focus groups. And so part of what I did just to test the ideas and the exercises and all. So I did that. And I had people from all over, really. And that went great. Good information, moving on. 3 months later, I get an email from someone who was in this focus group that was done online. And she says, could you come and do that exact workshop to my leaders? Come in person and do it. Okay, yes, I can. So I go and meet her in person. That's great. And she said, I'm just going to sit in the back so the team can just experience the whole thing. She came at the end after everybody else was gone, she came talk to me and she said, okay, here is what happened. I thought I would just sit at the back and let others enjoy it. What I realized is I had done my plan 3 months ago in the other online workshop, and it was so doable that I was able to implement it. And now I'm ready for the next version of it. So I used today to create my next version. And so it was doing it. It is beautiful because it was exactly how I was intending for it to work. For her specifically, one of the things I remember talking about is how she went from truly feeling her life was out of control before. She was running after herself all day, every day, meetings, things to do, running, rushing, never feeling like really that things were moving they were moving, but not having that satisfaction or that sense of being grounded in of leading these things. That was before. After, she was like, number one, my list of to do things is much shorter because I'm clear on what goes on that list and what does not even go there. So back to a bit of the prioritizing aspect that you were mentioning, Susan. And yeah, got clarity. And plus, in her case there, that was a live illustration of that self-efficacy moment that happens when you build, it works, and then you're ready to do the next version of it. And you're excited and optimistic about it.
Mm.
Mm,
And so that is that being in a constant state of upgrading and changing, right? That you realize that resilience isn't a one and done thing.
no,
It's a constantly evolving one, which I think is something that, as folks who work in innovation, we're constantly on the move. We're shifting gears all the time.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yes. And so it connects with that, but you need to do uh, that same approach that you have about the work you do. It will be even more effective if you're layering that same approach with your resilience, because then you can bring your best in all of these parts and enjoy the overall process even more. And doing this plan and updating it is not something long. I know no one has time. So the book, you can go through it in a 3-hour flight. You can actually do this. And the exercises, which will have the worksheets available in the show notes, I'll send them to you. They can be done on their own, without or with the book as you want, and they don't take long. Each exercise is never more than 15 minutes, 1-5. And so you can do all of them in an hour. So I understand we're very busy, very full. And sometimes I just do the plan with someone directly in a session, because if you feel like you want that, we can do that too. But the
Mm.
point is, it doesn't take a lot of time, but that little bit of attention is what changes everything.
It's just amazing, right? How neglectful we are of our own personal good. So I
Right.
have one last question for you, and that is, how do you build team resilience? So I might be the leader of my team, the rock or the wreck, either. And but I really want to get my team on board, and I want to be, conscientious of, you know, the VUCA, right? The volatility, uncertainty, all of that's hitting us. How do you build it with a team?
Yes. Yes. I would say you will build it over time, number one. So let's be realistic with this. It's something that builds over time. And the other thing I'll say before I answer your question is that a resilient team is not necessarily a team of resilient individuals. That helps, but just like that definition I gave about resilience, our ability to go through adversity, come out even stronger, that's true for us as individuals. It's also true for the team. So for
Mm.
a team to go through adversity and come out even stronger, we know from research there's two characteristics that are really important. One is clarity on goal. And it sounds obvious. Obviously, we're working on this thing. It's useful to clarify, to remind ourselves right now, our goal is this. Okay, so everyone is really clear, because the more we're clear on goal, the more everyone's going to shift as needed to reach this goal. And we don't want to assume that we're clear, especially in geographically dispersed teams. Okay, the second piece, and we've heard a bit more in the past few years about this concept, but it's the concept of psychological safety. So the
Mm.
degree to which in this team, we can bring up ideas I can bring up an idea that no one else has agreed with, or everyone's thinking completely different. And I know I can say it, it will be respected and listened to. We may not take it, that's fine, but I can say it. Which, of course, in innovation, you are used to this. At the same time, it may not be true about everything. And we want to make sure we nourish this, potentially, specifically, as it relates to resilience. So as a leader, you might, for example, say, if someone's asking you how your weekend was, instead of just saying, oh yeah, great weekend, went for a bike ride, you could say, yeah, great weekend, made sure I go for my bike ride because I needed it given the week we have ahead of us with this current launch or current challenge we
Mhm.
have. So now what you've just done is share that you're aware that you're human, out not in the rock situation. You've shared a bit of what some people would call vulnerability. Again, you could be rolling your eyes here. It doesn't matter. It's a known concept. It's useful. It builds trust. And you want that trust because that's what will make someone else express it if they are having a challenge or a rough day or an idea that's completely different or an ethical concern that is highly uncomfortable to bring up, whatever, right? So these are it, and that could be a longer conversation in itself. It's a very important one to have. But as a leader, if nothing else, what you could do is put on the radar, on the agenda of your next meeting, an item called resilience as a team. And then you just have a conversation with the team about what are we doing that's helping, and let's do more of that. You can start there.
Wow. Yeah, that would certainly change the meeting structure.
And you don't have to give it a lot of time. You can say, we're going to
Right.
talk about this for 5 minutes because we've got other things. But you're sending a strong message if, as a leader, that word makes it to that agenda.
I think that's fantastic. I think that's fantastic. MH, I know that people are going to want to read your book. Where's the best place for them to find it and to download these fantastic research sheets? I know you're making them available for free for people to
Yes,
kind of make their plan, even if they haven't bought or read the book, which I
that's
just
right.
think is so gracious. Tell us a little bit more about where we can get the book.
Okay, anywhere you get books in general, always love encouraging local bookstores. So
Mm.
go walk to your local bookstore. If they don't have it, they can order it for you, but we want to support. Otherwise, you can do your online, your usual Amazon, Barnes& and Noble, whatever you do usually. Online, you can find everything I do, including the book, at theresilienceplan.com. Yes, it was still available.
Fantastic.
Theresilienceplan.com. I know, who knows? And then LinkedIn, of course, always a great place to connect to that way you can add to your voice to the conversation. So always welcome connecting there.
Fantastic. MH, Dr. Marie-Hélène Pelletier, merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for being on the show today. We're really lucky to have you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Susan.